They told us the cold would take us before the pack ever did. They had the order wrong and everything else right. I have had a long time to think about that, and about a great many things, in the years since they pulled me off the ice at Carrow Deep with 3 fingers gone to black and a thing in my arms that should have killed me 100 times over. People ask me how I survived. They want the version with a clever trick in it, a last clip held in reserve, a relief column cresting the ridge with the dawn behind it. There was none of that. What there was, in the end, was a choice no manual ever covered, made by a tired man who had run out of every other thing a man can run out of. But you have to start where it started, and it started with the war. We had been losing it for 2 years by the time they posted me to Carrow Deep, though nobody up the chain would say the word. We said consolidating. We said elastic defense. We said tactical realignment of the forward arc, which is a great deal of syllables to lay over the simple fact that the enemy was eating us from the rim of human space inward, and we had not yet found the thing that would make them stop. Carrow Deep was a listening post on a world the survey teams had named Tan before they learned to hate it, a ball of blue ice and black rock turning slow under a small white sun that never got high enough to warm anything. We were buried 40 meters down in the old mining vaults, 22 of us, listening to the deep static for the sound of ships that were not ours, and reporting what we heard to a command that, I came to understand later, had already begun writing us off. You will want to know what they were. I can tell you what we knew, which is not the same as what they were, because no human ever sat across a table from one and asked. The science people had a designation for them, a string of letters and a catalog number, and not one grunt on the line ever used it. We called them the Gray. Some of the older hands called them hounds, but that was a comfort, a way of making them into something a man could picture, and it did them no favors as enemies go. They were not dogs. They went on 4 limbs when they wanted speed and 2 when they wanted their forelimbs for work, and they were tall doing it, taller than a man, and built long and lean the way cold world things are built, all surface tucked away to hoard the heat. Their hide was the gray of old ice with the dirt ground into it, and in the dark their eyes threw back a flat green light that did not blink when you wanted it to. They did not feel the cold the way we did. The cold was their country. We were the trespassers in it. That was not the worst of them. The worst of them was how they talked. They made sound, but not the kind that does you any good. The howl of the gray came in under hearing, down in the floor of the world, and you did not hear it so much as you felt it, a pressure in the fillings of your teeth and the long bones of your chest, a wrongness that climbed your spine and sat at the base of your skull and stayed. When a pack called across the ice, you knew it the way you know weather coming, in your body before your mind. Osai, our comms tech, ran the recordings through every filter we had and never found the language in it if it was language. He said it was more like a chord than a sentence. He said it was the pack telling itself it was still one thing. I did not understand that then. I do now. Because that was the truth of them we learned too late to use. The Gray were not soldiers. Soldiers can be made to break, to rout, to count the cost and decide the cost is too high. The Gray did not count. They were bound to one another by scent, by some chemistry we never mapped, a web of debt and kin that ran through a pack like current through wire, and when you killed one of them, you did not subtract a unit from an enemy order of battle. You wrote your name into something. You took on a debt that the whole pack now carried in its blood, and the Gray did not forgive debts and did not forget them and did not ever leave them unpaid. They would cross a continent of ice to settle one. They would lose 10 to take the one who owed, and they never in all the long catalog of that war left their young behind. Not when they ran, not when they died. A pack that abandoned its whelps was not a pack anymore. It was nothing. They would sooner be killed to the last than be nothing. We did not understand that we were fighting a debt. We thought we were fighting a war. The difference is the whole story. My sergeant was a man named Halloran, and if you have served you have met him, because there is one of him in every unit that is worth a damn. Old before his years, gray at the temple, a voice like a shovel dragged over gravel. He had been doing this longer than most of us had been alive, and he had the gift the good ones have, which is that he was afraid in exactly the right amount and never any more. He kept us steady. He kept the kid steady, and the kid needed it, because the kid was 19 and his name was Pell, and he had a way of laughing too quick that told you he was holding something down hard. Halloran never once told Pell to grow up. He just stood near him when the howls came in, close enough that the boy could feel another human being breathing, and that was worth more than any speech. There was Brun on the heavy weapon, a slab of a man who spoke maybe 40 words a week and made each one count. There was Osai and his recordings. There were the others, and I will not give you all their names, not because I have forgotten them, but because I have not, and there is a limit to how many graves a man can dig in a single telling. The night it came apart, the deep static changed. Osai caught it first. He had his eyes closed the way he did when he was really listening, and then they came open and he said very quietly that there were ships in the well, not one, a wave. They had not come for the post, not really. We were a splinter under the skin of a much larger thing, a feint on the far edge of an offensive that was about to fall on the whole sector, and they meant to pull the splinter before it festered. They meant to do it fast and quiet and leave nothing to report. Halloran did not waste a second on disbelief. He had us up and moving before the first tremor came down through the rock, and then the rock itself began to speak, that subsonic chord rolling up through 40 meters of stone like the world clearing its throat, and I watched the kid's face go the color of the ice above us. I am not going to give you the assault scene by scene. I have tried in the years since to lay it out clean the way a report wants it, this position held for this long, this fallback at this hour, and it will not go down on paper that way because it did not happen that way. It happened all at once and it happened in the dark. They came down the shafts faster than anything that size has a right to move, and they came in silence except for that cord in the bones, and Brun's heavy weapon turned the upper gallery into a corridor of light and noise, and it did not matter. It bought us minutes, and the minutes cost us men. They were in among us before the echoes died. I remember Pell firing and shouting and firing. I remember Halloran's voice cutting through it flat and certain. Fall back to the vault. Fall back. And I remember the green eyes coming through the smoke without hurry, the way you walk toward a thing you have already decided is yours. I took a wound in that first hour I did not even feel until later, a four-limb claw that opened my side along the ribs, and the cold of the place got into it, and that is its own long story of fever and stitching that I will not burden you with. What you need to know is that when it was over, when the cord rolled back up the shafts and away, and the silence came down like snow, I was the only thing in Carrow deep still drawing breath that was born on a human world. I want to be honest about the next part, because the honest part is the only part that matters. I did not stay to fight. There was nothing left to fight for and nobody left to fight beside. I went down. The vaults at Carrow deep ran deeper than the post used, old galleries the miners had cut and abandoned, and I went down into them because down was away from the green eyes, and because some animal part of me had decided that if I was going to die, I would do it in a hole where they would have to come and dig for me. I went down with a carbine and 2 clips and a hand light and the wound in my side gone hot, and I went down into the dark and the deeper cold, and that is where I found the den. I smelled it before I saw it. The gray carried a scent with them, musk and ozone and something underneath like wet ash, and it was thick in that lower gallery, thick the way a thing is thick where it lives. I came around a shoulder of rock with the carbine up and the light shaking, and I found a hollow they had made, scraped out and lined with what they lined such things with, and in the center of it a grown female of the gray lay dead. She had not died of the cold. She had taken a burst through the chest, our pattern, our weapon, and she had crawled here after, down and away from the fighting, and she had died curled around the thing she had crawled here to protect. I understood, looking at her, that she had been denned here through the whole assault, that she had not been a fighter at all, that she had been left in the deep with her young, while the pack went up to take the splinter out of their world, and that one of us, in the noise and the dark, had put a burst into her without ever knowing what she was guarding. There were 3 of them, the whelps. They were small, smaller than I would have guessed, blind still, their eyes sealed, their hide pale and soft where the grown gray were the color of dirty ice. They had crawled in against the cooling body of the female, and they were keening, not in sound, in that underhearing chord, but tiny, a frequency so low and so faint it was less a noise than a feeling of grief pressed flat against my sternum. They did not know she was dead. They knew she had stopped being warm. To a thing that blind and that young, in a world that cold, those are the same, and they are the end of everything. I stood there with the carbine on them for a long time. I am not going to pretend it was hard arithmetic. It was the easiest arithmetic in the world. They were the enemy. They were the enemy's future. Everything I knew about the gray told me that the pack would come back for these, that they did not leave their young, that as long as these 3 drew breath in the deep, there was a reason for green eyes to come down the shaft looking for me. The cold, smart thing, the soldier's thing, the thing Halloran would have understood even if he would not have liked it, was to put 3 short bursts into that hollow and go on into the dark and let the cold finish what the war had started. I had the weapon up, I had the angle, my finger was where it needed to be. And I could not do it. I have spent years trying to find the clean word for why, and there is not one, so I will give you all the dirty ones and let you sort them. Part of it was that I was a man at the bottom of 40 meters of rock who had just watched everyone he knew die, and there was a kind of madness in me that wanted, more than it wanted to live, to not add one more small dead thing to the pile of that day. Part of it was that they were keening, and the keening was in my chest, and you cannot put a burst into a thing that is grieving in your own sternum, not when you are the one who took the warm thing away from it. And part of it, the part I am least able to explain, was stubbornness, pure and stupid and human. The war had taken everything from me it was going to take. It had decided I was a splinter to be pulled. And some flat, hard piece of me looked at that and said, very quietly, that the war did not get to decide what I did down here in the dark where it could not see. Not this, not these. So I lowered the carbine. And then, because there was no halfway in it, I did the thing I cannot to this day fully defend. I went and I gathered up 3 blind enemy whelps that would grow into the kind of thing that had just butchered my whole world, and I put them inside my coat against the cold, against my own body, and I carried them deeper into the dark to find a place where the 4 of us might not freeze before morning. I found a side gallery with one mouth, defensible if it came to that, and a seam in the rock that breathed a little warmth up from somewhere far below, geothermal, the only mercy that ice world ever showed me. I got my back to the stone and the whelps in the warm of my coat, and I sat down to do the only soldiering left to me, which was to last. The first day I will not dignify with much telling. Fever and cold and the wound and the whelps and the slow grinding work of staying alive in a hole. I learned things about them in that day that no report ever held. I learned that they would not take food from a still hand, that you had to move it, had to make it live a little, before the instinct in them would answer. I learned that the keening stopped when they were warm and against a heartbeat, any heartbeat, even one as wrong as mine, and that it started again the moment the warmth went. I learned that they were not vicious. That was the thing that undid me in the end. I had built the gray in my head into a kind of weather, a force, a thing without a soft center, and here were 3 of them who were nothing but soft center, who wanted only to be warm and fed and not alone, the same as any small thing in the dark wants, the same as the kid Pell had wanted, standing close to me when the howls came in. I gave them the food and I gave them the warmth, and on the second day I did a foolish thing, which is that I gave them names. Not real names. I am not a fool twice over, but you cannot keep 3 living things alive without some way to tell them apart, and so the big one with the loudest keen became Sergeant, and the small one that always crawled to the bottom of the pile became Pell, and the third one, quiet and watchful before its eyes were even open, I called Osai. I told myself it was practical. It was not practical. It was a man who had lost his people building small false ones out of the only company the dark had left him, and I knew it even as I did it, and I did it anyway. On the third day the pack came back into the world above me, and I knew it, because the cord came down through the rock. It was not the assault cord. I had learned the difference by then, the way you learn the difference between a storm front and a clearing sky. The assault cord was wide and rolling and forward. This was tighter, lower. It moved back and forth across the post above me in long, slow passes, searching, and I understood that they had come back for what the den had held, that they had returned to a place they had already taken not for any ground but for 3 blind whelps in a hollow, and that they had found the female dead and the hollow empty, and that now they were doing the thing the gray always did. They were reading the debt. They were following the scent of the one who owed. And the one who owed was me. I had the whelps. I carried their scent on me, in my coat, in the warm of my own body, and to the gray that scent did not say protector. It said thief. It said the human who took our young. There is no word in their chemistry for a man who shelters an enemy's children. The closest thing they had was the worst thing they had, and that was the word for the one who has taken the young, and that word came with a debt that no pack in the history of their kind had ever once let go unpaid. I understood then, sitting in the dark with 3 of their children warm against my chest, that I had done the one thing in all the world most certain to bring the whole pack down on top of me. Not killing them would not save me. It would damn me. If I had put the bursts in on the first day and gone on alone, the scent would have gone cold with the cold, the debt would have died in the hollow with them, and I might have lasted in the deep until the war moved on. Instead, I had picked up the debt and put it inside my coat and carried it with me, breathing into the dark. I want you to sit with the shape of that because I sat with it for a long time in that gallery. The smart move and the right move had pointed in opposite directions, and I had chosen the right one, and the right one was going to get me killed. There was no version of this where the man who spared the whelps walked out. The gray would never read mercy in it. They could not. Mercy toward the young of an enemy was not a thing in their world. And so when they found me, and they would find a thief sitting in a den with the stolen young, and they would settle the debt the only way they knew, and the last thing I would feel would be that cord in my chest going wide and forward and final. I thought more than once about finishing it myself, putting the carbine under my chin and being done before the eyes came down the shaft. I will not lie to you about that. A man at the bottom of 40 meters of rock with the enemy reading his death in the stone above him thinks about a great many doors out. But every time my hand started toward it, the smallest whelp, the one I had called Pell, would crawl higher up my chest looking for the warm, and the keening would press flat against my sternum, and I would think, with a clarity that had nothing to do with hope, that whatever I had decided down here I had decided all the way. I had picked them up. You do not pick a thing up and then quit on it because the bill came due. Halloran taught me that, though he never said it in words. You stand near the thing that is afraid. You stay. So I stayed. I fed them and I warmed them and I let the wound do what it was going to do, and above me the cord went back and forth, tightening, and on the 5th day, by my count, though days were a thing I had to take on faith in that dark, it stopped moving back and forth and started moving down. I knew the sound of them in the shafts. I had heard it on the first night, that wrong fast quiet, claw on rock and nothing else, no breath, no call, just the cord rolling ahead of them down through the stone. It came down slow this time. There was no hurry in it. There never was. They had read the debt and they had found the trail and they knew exactly where I was, and they came the way the gray always came toward a thing they had decided was theirs. I did the soldiers' things because they were the only things my hands knew how to do. I set the carbine. I put the 2 clips where I could reach them. I put my back to the stone with the single mouth of the gallery in front of me and the seam of warmth behind, and I put the 3 whelps in the warm of my coat against my chest, not as a shield. I want to be clear about that, not as a hostage, but because it was cold and they were mine to keep warm, and I was not going to let them go cold in the last hour just because it was the last hour. And I waited. The first of them filled the mouth of the gallery without a sound. I had seen them in the smoke and the dark of the assault, fast and half-glimpsed, whether with eyes. I had never seen one still, up close, in the small steady light of a hand lamp, with nowhere to look but at it. It was enormous. It came in on all four limbs and even bent to the floor of the gallery. Its shoulders brushed the rock, and the green of its eyes was not the flat green I remembered. There was something working behind it. The hide of its chest and shoulders was scarred, old scars, the kind of thing earns over a long life of settling debts, and across the breadth of it, in the smell that rolled into the gallery ahead of it, was the female. I cannot explain how I knew. I knew. The scent of the dead female was on this one the way grief is on a man, woven in, and I understood that this was no random hunter sent down a shaft. This was the one the den had belonged to. This was the one who had left her in the deep with their young and gone up to pull the splinter, and come back to find her dead and the young gone, and read in the cold air exactly who had taken them. This was the Alpha, and he had come for vengeance, and he had every right to it, and we both knew it. He did not charge. I had braced for the charge, for the green eyes coming through the light without hurry, the way they had come for Halloran. He did not charge. He came 2 steps into the gallery and he stopped, and the cord that had been rolling ahead of him changed. I felt it change. It went from that tight forward thing, the settling the debt thing, to something I had no name for, something that broke up and scattered and came again, broke and scattered and came again, like a man saying a word over and over because the word has stopped making sense. And I realized he had stopped because of what he was seeing, and I made myself look at what he was seeing, look at it the way he must be. He was seeing a human, a thief. The owed-for one, run to ground in the deep, cornered, finished. He had come down 40 meters of rock to settle the oldest and worst debt his kind could carry, the taking of the young, and he had found the thief sitting against the stone with the carbine fallen aside, not raised, not aimed, and against the thief's chest, inside the thief's coat, warm and fed and alive and asleep, were 3 blind whelps that should by every law of his world have been dead. The smallest one, Pell, chose that moment to do what it always did. It crawled higher, up against my throat, searching in its sleep for the warm, and it let out one small keen, the contentment keen, the one they made when they were fed and warm and not alone, the one that pressed flat and easy against my sternum like a cat's purr made of pressure instead of sound. And the Alpha heard it, felt it. Whatever the gray did, he received it, the sound of his own young, the young he had come to avenge, keening not in fear and not in grief but in plain animal contentment, against the chest of the human who had every reason in the world to have killed them and had not. I watched the largest creature I had ever seen stand 4 meters from me, with the death of me in its jaws, and I watched it not be able to do the thing it had come to do. I did not move. I want to be very clear that I did not do anything clever. I did not have a plan. There was no last clip in reserve, no trick, no relief column on the ridge. There was only a tired man at the bottom of the world with 3 of the enemy's children asleep on his chest, holding still, because moving was the only thing that might break whatever was holding the Alpha's jaws. So I held still, and I breathed slow, and I let the whelp keen its small content keen against my throat, and I looked into the green eyes and I did not look away, and I waited to find out what a thing with no word for mercy does when it is shown one. It went on a long time. I have no honest measure of how long. Long enough that the cold came up through the stone into my legs and I let it. Long enough that the wound in my side throbbed in time with my pulse and I let it. The Alpha stood, and the cord broke and scattered and came again, broke and scattered and came again. And I understood that I was watching something happen in him that had no precedent in all the long blood debt history of his kind, that he was a creature built entirely out of vengeance and the keeping of the young, and that here those 2 things had been set against each other in a single sight, the thief and the saved, the owed for crime and the proof it had never been committed, and there was no cord in him for it. There was no answer. His whole self had come down, that shaft pointed at one act, and the act had dissolved in front of him into something he could not read and could not punish and could not, I think in the end, even hate. The big whelp, Sergeant, woke. It uncurled from the warm of my coat, and it found the scent in the air, the scent it had been born too late to know but knew anyway down in the chemistry, the scent of its own kind, and it lifted its blind head and it keened. And this keen was different. This was the call a young thing makes for the grown thing that means safety, and it pulled itself out of my coat and started across the cold stone of the gallery toward the alpha on its small, unsteady limbs. I did not stop it. I could have grabbed it. I did not. I had decided a long time ago, days ago, in the warm dark, that I had picked these up to keep them alive and not to keep them mine, and that if there ever came a chance to put them somewhere warmer and safer than the chest of a dying soldier, I would take it, even if taking it was the last thing I did. So I let the whelp go. I let it cross the gallery to the thing that had come to kill me, and the other two woke and followed it, Pell from my throat and Osai from my side, the three of them crossing the cold floor toward the alpha, keening the safety keen, going home. The alpha lowered his head to them. I have seen a great many things put down in the official record of that war, the dead counted, the ground lost, the orders given, and I have never once seen anyone write down what I saw next, because there is no box on a form for it. The alpha lowered his great scarred head to the three whelps crowding against his forelimbs, and he took them in, scent and warmth and the fact of them alive, and the cord that came off him then was not broken and scattered anymore. It was whole. It was the cord Osai had tried to explain to me 100 years ago in another life, the pack telling itself it was still one thing. He had come down into the deep to settle a death, and he had found 3 lives instead, and the math of his world, the math that never forgave and never forgot, ran the only way it could run when you put it against that. The debt was not paid. The debt had never been owed. There had been no theft. There had been the opposite of a theft, and his kind had a word for the opposite of a theft after all, even if no human ever found it in the recordings, because there he stood with it whole in his chest, gathering his children up. Then he looked at me. I met it. I had nothing left to meet it with but my eyes, so I met it with those. And the alpha and I looked at each other across 4 meters of cold gallery, the soldier and the weather. The thief who had stolen nothing and the vengeance that had nothing to take, and I will tell you what passed between us, and you can believe it or not, it makes no difference to me now. Nothing passed between us. There was no understanding. I did not look into those green eyes and find a friend, or a truce, or a wisdom, or any of the soft lies people want at the end of a story like this. He was as alien to me in that moment as he had been in the smoke of the assault. I never knew his mind, and he never knew mine. What there was, instead of understanding, was the plain fact of the thing we had each done, sitting in the air between us, undeniable. I had not killed his young. He was not going to kill me. Not because either of us had reached across that gulf and touched the other, because there was, at the bottom of it, nothing left to settle. He turned. He gathered the 3 whelps up the way the grown gray carried their young, and he turned, and he went back up the shaft into the dark, and the others I had felt waiting up there turned with him, and the cord rolled up through the rock, whole and going and gone, until the only sound left in Carrow Deep was the seam in the stone breathing its little warmth and a tired man breathing back. They found me 11 days after that. The war had moved on the way wars do, and a salvage element came down to strip what was left of the post for anything worth carrying, and they found me in the lower gallery with 3 fingers gone to black from holding small things against the cold, and a wound in my side gone to a scar, and a carbine I had never fired with both clips full. They asked me what happened. I told them the post was overrun, and I had gone deep and survived. It was true, every word of it, and it was a lie the size of the world, and I have told it that way for a long time because the true version does not fit in the mouths of the people who ask. I have thought a great deal in the years since about why he let me live. I used to think it was that I had spared the young, and that the gray had some law that answered mercy with mercy, balance for balance. I do not think that anymore. I do not think the Grey had any law that knew the word mercy at all. I think it was simpler and stranger than that. I think I had done a thing his kind had no cord for, and that a creature cannot punish what it cannot name. I think I survived not because I was forgiven, but because I had stepped, by accident, out of the one part of his world where killing me made any sense, and into a place his kind had never had to map, where a human kept the enemy's children warm in the dark for no reason it could read, and he had stood at the edge of that place and looked into it and turned away, because there was nothing in it for him to do. People ask me whether I would do it again. Pick them up, knowing what it would cost, knowing it was the surest way in all the world to bring the pack down on my head. They want me to say yes because the story is better if I say yes, cleaner, the kind of thing you can put on a wall. I am too old now to make the story clean for them. I do not know if I would do it again. I have lain awake on a great many nights with the cold of that gallery still in my hands. The 3 fingers I do not have aching the way they say a lost limb aches, and I have not once landed for certain on what I would do. But I will tell you the thing I do know, the thing I came down out of that dark with, and it is this. The war had decided what I was. It had named me a splinter and pulled me and written me off and left me 40 meters down in the ice to die alone, and there was nothing I could do about any of that, not one thing, except in that one gallery in that one dark there was a thing it could not decide for me. It could not reach down into the hollow and put my finger on the trigger. That was mine. The last thing in the world that was mine when everything else had been taken was what I did with 3 blind, helpless things the war wanted dead, and I kept them warm, whatever it cost, whatever it nearly cost. I kept them warm because it was the one piece of me the war never got to own. The salvage hands wanted to know why I was crying when they pulled me up the shaft into that thin white daylight. I told them it was the light, after so long in the dark. It was not the light.